Okay, so explain so the algebraic structure GL11 plus GL11 is a super Lie algebra. We have a triangular decomposition, and the positive part is just is one-dimensional. So it's a one-dimensional vector space, but put in odd degrees. So somehow the idea is that so I should say this is all joint work with n dimension. So the idea is that if you look at a version of the representation theory of this one-dimensional Lie algebra, super Lie algebra, higher categorical version, let's say two representations, so some suitable version of this acting on categories, this should be the same as something called Heegaard-Floer theory. Partly question mark. So that's what I'll try to discuss in this talk. So that's from the point of view of Lie theory. It's a super Lie algebra. So if you take C in odd degrees, and this is a Lie algebra. Okay. So it's enveloping algebra. It's going to be this, okay. And so representation of this Lie algebra, this super Lie algebra, is a vector space endowed with an endomorphism that squares to 0. Okay. And so a two representation of there, what that will mean is that instead of having a vector space and an endomorphism that squares to 0, that means you have a category with an endofunctor E such that E composed with itself is isomorphic to 0 in a certain sense. So that's basically the structure. So the structure we'll be looking at. So the idea is that out of that type of structure, one should recover invariants of manifolds, 3, 4 manifolds that are sensitive. For example, 4 manifolds sensitive to the smooth structure. So let me explain. So somewhere there's going to be some homotopical. There are some homotopical phenomena that give rise to this low-dimensional topology invariants. So what's Heegaard-Floer theory? So let's maybe I'll abbreviate HF. It's a partial 4D TQFT. So we've seen parts of axioms of TQFTs. So what does it do to a 4-manifold? What are my notations? 4D, yeah, 4-dimensional manifold Y, so something closed, oriented. We associate. Okay, so what are my notation? We associate just a number. So you want invariants of 4-dimensional manifold. So the first to do something like that was something sensitive to the smooth structure that distinguishes them amongst a given topological structure. That's Donaldson, and then there are invariants. So these ones are hard to compute, and then there are the Seiberg-Witten invariants, which are easier to compute and which are essentially equivalent to Donaldson's invariant. So these things are somewhat similar. And then the Seiberg-Witten invariants are also related to those Heegaard-Floer invariants. So there is a version of Seiberg-Witten theory where to understand what Seiberg-Witten due to Floer in terms of Floer homology. And that's this thing I would call Heegaard-Floer theory. So some of the theories is a Hegardt-Schler theory for four-dimensional manifolds. The number it gives, the invariants it gives are somehow comparable, more or less the same as the Donaldson.
They're not exactly the same because somehow Donaldson invariant, somehow this is just the ones that in principle exist for any irreductive group where sort of actual Donaldson invariants are for SL2.
No, but I mean, but there is an early result that says that Donaldson invariant for any reductive group can be deduced from those of SL2.
Somehow,
so that's what it means. That's what it means.
The TQFT, in principle, there's a TQFT attached to any reductive group. So I wonder if this.
But there are millions of TQFTs that have nothing to do with any reductive groups. I mean, TQFTs have nothing to do with groups, with algebraic groups.
This is Donaldson theory, which is a topological theory.
But I'm talking of TQFTs. I'm not talking of gauge theory or anything. You understand? So I'm saying there is a TQFT that does some things that have nothing to do with groups. And the invariants it produces are invariants that can be compared, that contain the same data as those of Donaldson, etc. And Donaldson, you can take any.
Also TQFT.
Yes, that's exactly my point.
Which is different from that one.
It's the same invariant. So we can discuss that after. What I've said is precise, but yeah, you. Yes, but they are known to be that the invariants for SUN can be in some sense obtained from those for SU2.
No, that's not wrong.
Well, or it's conjectural. It's maybe conjectural. Maybe physicists. No, maybe it's a conjecture. There are partial results, but it's a conjecture. Okay, it's a conjecture. Yeah. But anyway, let's say SU2. Okay.
Okay, this was one. Okay.
But this has nothing to do with gauge theory. Okay. The theory I will be talking about has no groups. Okay. So don't think about groups. SU2, SU2, etc. So this is these things are known to be yeah. Anyway, let's stick to SU2. But somehow the group is not important. This Hegardt-Schler business. So in 3D, if you start with X, then what you're getting is a little more than a vector space. It's a differential. Say F2 module, complex of F2 modules. And if you have, so what I'll be saying, there are people who know much better this theory than me, is partial. So what I'll be pretending that you can do things with arbitrary manifolds. It's not quite like that. So if you have a manifold that's a four manifold that is not closed, that are boundaries, so three manifold. So if you think of a cobordism, Y giving you a cobordism between X1 and X2, so Y is now not closed but as an incoming outgoing boundary. To that you will associate a linear map from, so this one, let's call it CF of X. So the usual field theoretic business, and that's what Oswald and Szabo. That's their Hegardt-Schler theory.
So here your coefficients are F2, and then
yes.
But then we said that in 4D you get a number. So is it a number? Is it a complex number or an element of F2?
So all of that is made precise by the people who did the theory. So I'll move on, okay?
No,
so
I'm just asking what are your coefficients?
So the coefficients are F2 for what I'll be doing, but you can, if you want, you can do better than that. And what I'm not saying is that there's an extra variable, etc., etc. Okay, so that's.
But I'm just asking.
No, I think I won't answer your questions anymore because I don't have time for that. Okay. So this is what I'm saying is correct. This is a number mod 2, etc. I don't think I said something really wrong. It's kind of interesting, but this can be made interesting. But all these things get really complicated and. Somehow not the purpose of my talk, and I wouldn't be able, anyway, to make them to the level of precision that maybe Sasha would want. I'm sorry. So this is a theory that that produces these numbers in that reproduces numbers, and there are several series. There are variants of this theory, so that in some sense answers your question. So that I'm not saying which of the Hegardt-Schler theory, depending on. And then people. So this is still hard to compute. And what Lifshitz, Oswald, and Thurston did is so if your three manifold is obtained by by gluing two handle bodies, then you would want to look at the surfaces which are boundaries of those handle bodies and be able to associate something to them and be able to reduce your theory down to 2D. So for 2D, so again, now really I'm going to be really doing an approximation of what's going on. So if you take a surface now, what you're going to associate is some sort of differential category. So there are gradings, but the gradings are by non-commutative groups of vector fields. So it's not quite Z-graded everywhere. So there is a differential category, let's say CF of sigma. And if you have, again, a cobordism between two surfaces, given by some manifold, then you will get a functor. You get a bimodule in some sense, CF of sigma. So that's an approximation of X2. So sorry?
Some like modular functor.
So it's in dimension 4. Okay, so it's not a modular functor. It's not a 3D theory. It's a 4D theory, and it's not defined. So that's exactly somehow what I'll be addressing. A modular functor is something that should be defined the way down to dimension 1. So that's an issue, but it's definitely not anywhere close to having that. So things are fairly complicated. What you associate really is an algebra depending on additional data and sigma handle decomposition and more things. So this can be understood also as a Fukaya category of symmetric power of sigma. That's Lekili-Perutz and Oru. So there are and I mean the Fukaya category depends. It's wrapped, so you need to put some condition as well. So it depends on some extra structure. So there is a first difficulty there, which is that you would want to put extra structure on sigma. And so the idea is that you have seen that in the David Jonas talk yesterday, is that maybe this category is natural from, maybe there is a good way to produce this category abstractly without extra structure. But then if you want a generator inside, you put extra structure there, then you will have a specific generator, and its endomorphism ring would be one of those algebras that these people define. And so it's similar to what you observe then is, in terms of representation theory, is really that maybe you have the same representation, but you have different bases inside. So maybe there will be one choice will be more like a canonical basis, one choice more like a standard basis. So the choice of assigning really an algebra to surface source of extra data is like choosing a basis inside a representation. Right, and so now, so what people have tried to do is to deal with, say, three-dimensional manifolds with corners. So this would be just a non-closed three-dimensional, so go down to dimension 1. So let me maybe explain that in some sense the theory here, these things can go together, so you really have 3-4D TQFT. And what Lifshitz or Svartsasten do, it's a version of the Hegarth-Floer theory that's not so interesting for 4 manifolds. And so what they really do is, in some sense, that's a 2-3D theory anyway. And so one can try to go down and at least 1-2D. So hopefully, this thing should extend to dimension 4 and here similarly. So that's something that was started by Douglas and Manorescu. And maybe I shouldn't write so low. And then Lifshitz. And that were also with Manion. So you would want to assign exactly to assign something to a circle. So you want to say so your differential category. For example, if you take a surface with an S1 boundary, then you would want this differential category to be an object of 2 categories that's associated to S1. Okay. So that's what I will be. So what you associate, well, I don't need to put a question mark, is a certain thing that I will call U. And maybe I'll move here. So U is maybe I should say U mod is a differential monoidal category. So it's a monoidal category, just that the home spaces are differential modules. And when you have a monoidal category, you can look at its modules. So you can look at differential categories acted on by this monoidal category, and that's a two category, and that's what you would associate there. So the U that's been proposed by Douglas and Emanuescu is something again that fits somehow with the fact that all of that is about. I mean, you can go to S1 by you can thicken S1 to make it into a surface, just times an interval, and then you can have you would have some category there. And then you do an algebra, you do Fukaya version, and so you can try to guess what this is. So that's what Douglas and Emanuescu did, and the end result was something that was already around. It's a free monoidal category on one object, E, and one map. Tau that goes from E tensor E to itself, modulo relations. That tau square is 0. So it's a differential category. So what is the differential of tau? It's actually the identity. And Bread relations. So that happens in E tensor E tensor E. Okay, in E tensor E, you can apply, you have an endomorphism of E tensor E, you can apply it here or there.
And is it over F2?
So that's exactly, no, yes, this is a very good question. So there are difficulties here with going over F2 and Z, and I'm not totally clear. I mean, most of the things are expected to work over Z, and some of the things have been proven to work over Z, but things are easier over 2. So doing these things is very nice for an algebra, because when there are like infinity things or whatever, it's necessary to be over F2 to not have to deal with signs. So here it's a much more serious problem. That the algebras we have are the usual Hecke algebras of the symmetry group, equipped with a differential, and that doesn't work at all outside characteristic 2. So if you want to leave that construction to Z, to the integer, so there are some proposals around, but it's going to be considerably more difficult. Okay, so there is some drastic simplification from the algebra point of view over F2. And the topology, it's not maybe as drastic. I mean, it's technically a big simplification to be over F2 than over Z when you do these quantities. But from that point of view, it's more than technical. It's really conceptually there is a big difference. So what is this category U as objects? Just the powers E tensor E tensor E, and there are no maps between two different powers in this monoidal category. And the endomorphism of a power is just a Hecke algebra. So it's going to be the F2 algebra generated by Ti squares to 0. Ti Tj is Tj Ti. Wait, I said that you are not allowed to ask questions. Give me that. Sorry. So, and then there's a. Yes. So we have the Bread relations as well. So this Hecke algebra is the usual Hecke algebra of the symmetry group with 0 parameters. And this algebra has a differential. Like if you take any Hecke algebra of a Coxeter group over F2, you can do this recipe where you put your differential where the generators are differential 1. So this is a little bit funny because that means that these algebras, they have no cohomology as soon as n is greater than or equal to 1. So let's call them Hn. So H star of Hn is 0 if n is at least 2. So some of the whole theory is built on algebras, differential algebras, which have this one is differential graded, which have zero cohomology. So you have to be a little bit careful, not just look at cohomology, otherwise not pass to derived categories, otherwise everything collapses. Okay, that part was very approximate. Hopefully things will get a bit more precise now.
So is this category have anything to do with the HCQ that it did yesterday? Like maybe for SU2?
I mean, this has to do with the GL1. This has to do with GL11. So if you look at the I don't know, derived category, whatever, you look at the Grothendieck group, you'll find that the powers of n greater than 2 or 0. So if you decategorify, well, you'll get the Levers content group that you have one generator. You have a ring with one generator E, and the square is 0. So that's you recover this U of plus, and that's an old idea of Kovanov. So Kovanov saw that people in Hegardt-Floer theory were doing things with differential whatever that suggested to Kovanov to consider this category and with this property, and then now we are using this category back in Hegardt-Floer. Okay. So if you look only at cohomology, you at the level of K0, you don't see very much. So what I would like to explain is, so in this 1, 2, say TQFT, you have a particular surface. So what this surface does is it starts with the invariant associated to 2 circles and goes to the invariant associated to 1 circle. So for 1 circle, you get this U. So you should get a functor from U times U to U. And so in the usual Frobenius algebra version, and this is what gives the product structure there. So what we'll explain is, yeah, that this makes sense. So U mod becomes really a tensor category, monoidal category. And so what's that? And that's compatible with the gluing of surfaces. So that means you can somehow you can reconstruct say the algebras associated to surfaces from the case where sigma is I don't know is one of the elementary from a case. What's an example would be, for example, that, and maybe you want also to do puncture your sphere. So that's probably enough to. So you can break when you have a general surface, you can cut it in pieces, and you will be able to reconstruct your. Using this pair of bands to reconstruct marginal surfaces. Okay. So that's one thing that works. So it's the first step in recovering Hegardt-Floer theory from algebra. So this is pure. This is something within the realm of algebra. So the new construction is this kind of tensor product, and checking that it fits with. It does give back the invariance. Invariance you want. So maybe I should say what are the kind of algebras or categories that show up. So what is some examples? So if you take what do you take as an example? Well, if you were to take that, you would get. So this is something. This is modules over a certain algebra. That if you add some structure on sigma, so here there's no structure to add. So here the algebra would be just k. So now if you make a puncture inside here, then what you get is an algebra that has two in two terms. And I should say this is really, you need to make, this will depend on the, on some extra structure. So you need some handle decomposition. You need some cycles that will, some loops that will generate, some arcs that will generate the homology. So for this, you have that. And if you start looking at something more complicated, so if you take something like this, so do I want to punctuate? Maybe I want to punctuate as well, or did I?
Is it known what happens with a sphere with n punctures?
Sorry?
Is it known what happens with a sphere with n punctures?
Yes. So that's yes. So that's something you get by gluing just a sphere with one puncture. Yes.
What is the algebra?
What is you want to know?
No.
So no. So for if you take us, it depends. I mean, there are more. It depends how you do what arc decomposition you take.
Yes.
So in the simplest case, okay. If you take S3 minus with n punctures, you have to be a bit careful. So what you get is okay, representations of n minus one. You take n minus one quiver, n or n minus one quiver.
But still, for some reason, you want to do everything over F2, or?
Yes. No. It's just
I mean,
it's
so far all your answers made sense.
yes. No. But the problem is that this is for now. It's the algebra. It would be way too difficult to deal with over this. So. But yeah, so things should work over this, and eventually to get interesting invariants to go to dimension 4, you would have to work over this. Okay, so there are. Oh yeah, I was about to give the case of one more example, but since I gave the sphere, maybe I can skip. Or maybe I should give an example of. Wait.
So first you meant S2 minus n punctures, right?
I meant S2, yes.
And
And I didn't really. What I mean is, I mean no. What I should say is I should say disk minus n punctures.
but the punctures are at the boundary. They're
So yeah, I'm not exactly. I mean, I didn't. It's not. That's why I was. I didn't plan to talk of that example because that's what it is. It's not a disk. It's that. So these surfaces, they always come with in the Egger-Schler theory. You always have a privileged S1 with a mark point on it. Okay. So you can present things in a different way. I'm thinking of them of having just an interval in the boundary, so mark point. So now if you take the disk and if you fix some intervals like that, this is what I meant by that. So I was yeah. So there, this is yeah.
There are no punctures.
No. So I reply. Victor asked a question, but I said what I wanted to say, which was not quite the answer to his question. But I think that was that somehow. I mean, there are problems. It's not completely clear what the 2D field theory should be. Whether what we're associating to a circle should be associated to a circle or just to an interval. So there are a number of complications which makes asking S2 minus n puncture what exactly you get. Yeah, it's a bit complicated, but there is I would think that it's a little bit yeah. I mean, from the Teichmüller point of view, yeah, that's probably what you want to look at anyway. So what's important is that there are either intervals or, depending on how you present the theory, circles with mark points on the boundary, and each of them somehow will give you an action of this monoidal category. Right. So these algebras have been were defined in the original work of Lifshitz, Oswart, and Thurston, and that was generalized by Zarev, so Lifshitz, Barsterstone, Zarev, and then we further generalized those algebras. So when you have so I was going to put maybe I should draw it differently. I should really make it like that and put maybe the puncture, circle puncture there, and then what should we do? We should go one like that, and maybe if I want to fit with the example I have, then you need another one that goes in the boundary there, and then back. Okay, so you have two. You take your torus, and you have a puncture there. You have a circle mark point, and you draw those two arcs. Some of the algebra you associate depend on that, and so to that you associate. It's going to be a product of K by an algebra which is a quiver algebra. K is F2 there of what's a quiver? So you have just two. No, there's three things. So there's a B and there's an A and a prime. And the relation is that if you do BAB is BA prime B is 0, and the differential is 0 in those cases. And then there's another term that's 70 plus times a more complicated. So there's a 7-dimensional algebra, which is whose homology is just 1-dimensional. That comes. So that's the algebra you would associate to the torus with a puncture. Okay, so in general, you can associate an algebra. You can encode this structure, this combinatorial structure of arcs in some combinatorial manner. So you can generalize that. So there's a combinatorial. Encoding. So tomorrow you take some sort of skeleton of your surface, some sort of one complex, but you can encode in a way slightly different using some singular curves. So in the first example, the curve would be something like that at this point. And the second example, what's it? The second example, it's maybe something like that. There are two intersection points. So you can encode the surface together with the extra decoration, or in singular curve, or conversely, starting with such a singular curve, you can produce a surface, and some of the ends of the curve have to do with this S1 boundary circle. And so to that you can associate a differential algebra, or a differential. Maybe you can view it as a differential category where the objects are families of singular points. So for example, here you have just one singular point. So the category will have two objects, either empty or that singular point. And here there are going to be there's going to be four objects, either empty, one of the 2 points, or both points. And the arrows in the category, so there will be idempotents in your algebra, and there are additional elements, and they are given by a path in the curve, which respects the smooth structure. So you cannot, if you start with the path there, you're not allowed to go there, or you decrease that to be 0. So the maps from a subset I to J is a collection of smooth paths up to homotopy. So for example, in this case, you have two possibilities. Either you do a smooth path from that point to itself that you don't move, or you go around like that. So there are only, in this case, there are only the algebra. Let's say in this case of let's say algebra A1 or that category. So there will be the empty set, and empty set to empty set. The home space is just K. And if you take from that point to itself, you have two things. You can do either the identity or that you go around. And if you square that, if you were to square that, you start with this path, you are there, and then you do it around. Again, you're going to get a non-smooth path, okay? This doesn't respect the smooth structure. You're going back there. You have this is not smooth, and so you decrease the square then to be 0. And that's the structure there. So for, in this case, so yeah, let's say A2, there are many more objects, but I will describe, let me describe one example. So which one is it? Let me look at the one I plan to describe. And one with a differential, yeah, okay, this one. So you can do a path from the point to itself. And then you do the identity on that point. You put the identity there. Okay, so you take those 2 points and you do a path from that point to itself. It doesn't move, and a path from that point to itself. That's like that. So let me call it. This is a map maybe alpha, and so alpha goes from point to from 2 points, 2 points. And now what's happening, I didn't tell you what is the structure of, what is the differential. What the differential does is that it resolves crossings. So here, this path doesn't move, and that path goes around. It's going to cross that one here. So resolving crossings means if you have something like that, so if a path crossing another path, that's one of the basic things in this in this bordered Egarth-Floer. You replace it by that. Okay. And so if you do that for this picture, what you're going to get is so let me change colors because colors are unrelated. Is when you resolve, you'll get a path going from here to here. And then another path that goes around like that, goes from there to there, and this one there. So this, you have this combinatorial way of building algebras that goes back to Lifshitz, Oswald, Thurston. So you associate that to an arbitrary surface, and what you can show is that these. If you take sigma with prescribed with given with a given boundary, so given S1, then you get an action of U on the corresponding category, which I think I call CF of sigma. So if you add when you do that, you really do something with the surface with extra structure. So you start with you can start with one of those singular curves, and the action will has to do with the endpoint. So in some sense, there are 2 actions. It's really that you have one functor and it's, one action. You have a Nando functor, but you could also consider its whatever right or left adjoint. Okay, so that has to do with singular curve. So if you take inside your singular curve, so that part will give an action. and yes.
I really understood the relationship between the singular curves and the previous picture.
Singular curves and the surfaces. So essentially, you you take this times an interval that thickens it, that makes it a surface. That's an approximation of the surface you would get. Okay, it's a little more complicated. You need to twist things at the singular points, but that's almost what you get. So when you do that, you're never going to get. You're always going to get something with something open. There's always going to be something in the boundary. Okay, you can't get. So that's you can fill it then with a two handle to get something close. But I don't want to make that precise because it's a point where there are two options basically, and depending. The option I follow is really inspired by that was Zarev's option. It's really there's a border theory. This is a suture theory. So suture theory has to do with contact structures on a three-dimensional manifold. So LOT theory has to do with more Hegardt decomposition, and this has to do more with contact structure. So this thing there is somehow closer to.
What are the surfaces in these two cases?
So there were the ones I described. Okay.
Oh, okay.
One was sphere with punctures and disk with punctures, and this one torus. Right. Okay, so let me see what I want to say. Okay. Yes. So the gluing. So you can glue. So if you take two surfaces, you can obtain. So if you have a surface sigma, as explained, with an S1 inside, boundary of sigma 1, and similar in the boundary of sigma 2. Then what you can do is glue the surfaces along pair of lines. Eventually, you can do a proper gluing by closing this hole. If you want really to glue them, you close the hole. But in some sense, it's from the TQT point of view, you should do that first, and then you have one more operation. So this can be realized in terms of our tensor products that I still need to define. So in terms of the curves, so you would have two curves, sigma 1, and then you have the curve maybe sigma 2. And what you're doing is you're gluing the curves there. That's what you're doing. So when you glue the curves on the endpoints, you get a new curve which will describe this good surface. So it's very concrete, very combinatorial. And the way this is done is what I'll describe now. So if you have we have this category monoidal category U, and suppose it's acting on V1 and V2, which are suitable differential categories. So there could be something like differential modules over some differential algebras, typically. Then you can form a tensor product. So this is something that we'll have as objects pairs, so M alpha, where M is the differential module for the tensor product algebra, or the tensor product of differential categories. But there is some extra data. Alpha is going to be a map from, so there's an action of this endofunctor E, so we'll call it E1. There's an endofunctor E1 on that category, E2 on that one. So what you need as well is a map from E1 of M to E2 of M, and that should commute with taus. So remember that an action of this monoidal category is the data of an endofunctor together with the data of an endomorphism, a natural transformation from E1 squared to itself. So if you apply alpha somehow twice, you're going to be able to relate E1 square applied to M to E2 squared applied to M, and that should commute with the tau. So that's what the objects of this differential category are, and the maps are just morphisms of A1 tensor A2 differential module commuting with alpha. And you can now endo that with an action of the module category U. So that's, I'm defining something that takes two U modules and make a new U module. So E acts on M alpha by sending it to a new pair where M prime is just the cone of the map alpha. So E, we have done a tensor product or maybe an internal hub. Let's say a tensor product of two representations of Lie algebra. The element of the Lie algebra should act as H should act as H tensor 1 plus 1 tensor H. So here it's more like E1 tensor 1 minus E2, or there is a sign, but it's okay. So you can make an action like this. So you need to specify what is the alpha prime. So alpha prime is going to be a map that you have to apply E1 to that. So that should go from this complex. So that's where something interesting is happening. Not only place, but so you need to go from the cone of that map. So if you want from that complex to that complex, and you have a way to go from here to here is applying E1, E2M is the same as these two functors commute. So what you need is just a map from E1M to E2M, and you have that. That's alpha, but that's not what you should put. You should first apply your tau 1, and then you can apply E1 of alpha. Similarly here, you apply first E2 alpha, and then you apply tau 2. That's almost it. And then this is not really, it's really differential modules. So diagonal contribution to that, and that's the identity map. Those two things are the same. So there is a morphism of differential objects from the cone, from E1 of M prime. The whole thing there is E1 of M prime. And you go to E2 of M prime. So it's very explicit, and then you can define an endomorphism 2 of E composed with itself. Implicit formula. It's if you look suitable matrix form, it's anyway. So everything very explicit, very simple, and you check that so the resulting structure is has become a module over this module category, and that it does have the property you want with respect to surfaces. So you recover those surfaces, those algebras associated to surfaces by performing this tensor product construction. So that's what I explained. In this situation there, if you call sigma the glued surface, you find that say A of sigma or is can be identified with this finite tensor product. So that's a first step in recovering the Heegard-Fleur invariance. So maybe I should say also why do that with GL11 rather than SL2? So there is you can define this tensor product for say any Kac-Moody, particular SL2. So you could, there's a notion of two representations also for SL2, back to work with Strong, and you can define a tensor product, but the difficulty there is that it's defined only somehow in infinity categorical or infinity, if you want, categorical world. So you can do similar constructions. And everything would work, but except that with this construction, what you will end up with is you have a modular category round. It's not an action of the modular category, but somehow an action up to homotopy with homotopy is compatible, etc. So you really have to move in the world of action, everything up to homotopy. And so that's much more, then it becomes much more difficult to do calculations. So the difficulty in the Kac-Moody world, if you look at Hecke algebras, affine Hecke algebras, Cooper Hecke algebras, is precisely that the affine part. So here, the miracle is that we're dealing only with the Hecke algebra. There are no exci's, there's no affine part. It's just a finite Hecke algebra. And these exci's are the ones that are responsible for the homotopical complications. So somehow in the super world, it looks like there is no, from geometrical point of view, there are no line bundles, or at least no giant classes, no C1s of line bundles, which are things giving the affine part of Hecke algebra, of affine Hecke algebras. Okay, so there is a drastic simplification there. So so that's good. Now, if you want to go next, so you would expect that the category U mod, or maybe this has to do with the positive part. So if you double it suitably, there should be a braiding. And now this will become, this will get into homotopical phenomena. So say a few words about that. Yes.
Is there an algebraic operation which corresponds to capping off the?
Yes, that's just taking. So yes, there is a trivial representation. So just I don't know, just k-diff. And if you do just a regular hom, let's say of a triv, this is the same as a capping. Yeah. Yeah. So that part is I mean, it's easy. No, actually, yeah, it's not. That's exactly. That's a very good question, and there is a reason why I didn't talk about that. Is that this can be done in more than one way in some sense, and this is related to what I'll do next. So everything I've done so far. There are no derived categories, no triangulated categories, whatever. Everything is just differential modules, so just vector spaces with an element that squares to 0 over F2. You never do things up to homotopy, etc. So that's why we could do it somehow easily. I mean, there was no difficulty. So now, if you want to look, actually, this already is a problem. Or if you want to look at some things like braiding, so you would expect suitable. You would expect things like that. But now these have to do with surfaces, and this map is going to have to do with the three manifold. Three manifold that gives you the R matrix. And when you move in this world, you have to you're going to have to start working somehow up to homotopy. So there's going to be infinity structures. Are going to show up. I mean, we know they should arise because they arise in the Hegardt-Fleurs, they arise in the Fukaya setting. But somehow, when you deal with surfaces, you can put everything under the carpet. Everything is so elementary somehow. It's that from the Fukaya point of view, that there is no such subtlety. But so already for the R matrix, and even for somehow even before there, I mean, that's also, you have to be a bit careful about that. You can define one version, but there is a better version. You need to deal with that. So from the point of view of Hegardt-Fleurs theory, what instead three manifolds are encoded combinatorially, something called the Hegardt diagram. And so what's missing there is when you have say two surfaces, so you can associate to them kind of representations of this category U. and then a Hegardt diagram between the surfaces should give rise to a functor between these representation categories. But then things start to getting complicated. For example, if you want to say that you would expect the braiding to be invertible, respect to braid relations would be the first things you want to express. But this is going to be expressed by a four manifold now. So all things starting, when you start moving to the world of three manifolds, you can maybe define things still on the nose, not to homotopy, but whatever interesting thing you want to prove about those things is going to be expressed by four manifold. And that's unavailable in any, if you try to build 4D TQFTs, you have to deal with that. And that's definitely bringing infinity structure. So there is one, another reason why the, looking at what the Hegardt-Fleur theory people have done, I think could be very interesting for representation theory, is that from what they do, infinity structures show up, but show up in a canonical way. So if you do representation theory or algebraic geometry or whatever, you have algebras that may not be formal. So you have an object in some DG category or triangulated category. You take it the graded endomorphism ring. Oh, you say it has more structure. It's really a DG algebra. I should take care of that. But the way you're going to encode that is normally not going to be canonical. So you could take some kind of bar resolution, but it's not something canonical. There are extremely few cases where you can produce something reasonably small and canonical when it's not when the algebra is not formal. You can say, oh, there's an infinity structure on cohomology, but there's almost never a canonical choice for that, or a good canonical choice. Whereas in the Hegardt-Fleur theory, on Foucault categories, there are some extra choices at the beginning, but then everything is canonical. The higher multiplications are canonical. So I think it's when you want to build four-dimensional TQFTs from representation theory, infinity structures show up very quickly, and it's not clear how to make them canonical. But this is a world where they come canonically from the symplectic geometry. So yeah, I think I'll stop there. But just to say that this hopefully will recover a good more of Hegardt-Fleur theory, but it should be also an inspiration for what one should be doing with actual groups. Eventually, I want to do things with G a reductive group. So here it's.
But do you want to do this also over F2 or over C or what?
So the reason over F2 somehow you can get rid of the affine part. You can get rid of this. So the land bundles somehow are trivial over F2, whatever, they disappear. But if you go back to Z, sometimes they are there. You can't completely get rid of them. So if you want to do SL2, doing it over Z over F2 shouldn't make a difference, except technically that. You have to deal with the infinity signs or whatever. It's a bit pain. It's less pain if you don't have to worry about that. But I think that's the only things where you would have a difference. So in this series, Z and F2 should be basically the same, just more. You have to be more careful. Whereas here, going over F2 is this trick that allows you to drastically, does drastically, I think, simplify the homotopical theory. Yes.
So the theorem in the end is this A sigma is isomorphic to this A sigma.
Yes, but as algebras, not really the algebra. You can make sense of the algebras.
Do you have the assumption that sigma is non-compact?
So this is partly due to, I said that to Douglas Manescu. So sigma is has to have this in the boundary, otherwise you can't make sense of that. So there's no, we still don't know how to associate. That's why. Joel's question is problematic, because if you were to close, then this would become compact. There would be no more boundary. But that doesn't work. There's something fishy there. So no, yeah.
So then how does it differ from the Monodescu-Douglas result?
That's exactly the same. So the difference with is really that when they did that, somehow they thought that what they were doing was gluing like that. So they defined, so our construction is more general, but in the cases that they've dealt with, it would be the same. But they would think of this picture. Somehow they don't realize in their construction that there is still some kind of privileged puncture that you should use for an action. Okay, So that's a difference. And if you want to cut into pieces, you need to be able to use pair of pants. So they didn't realize the pair of pants aspect, which requires one thing is to define this category, and another then is to implement the action. So they didn't do that. But otherwise, what they do much more in that they do things that with the deep shift towards the three-dimensional picture.
What's the three manifold you were saying is supposed to correspond with gradient?
Okay, I cannot draw any three manifold, but it's a fact that if you do I shouldn't try, but so this is not embedded. Okay, so when you take this is they don't cross. They don't. It's not like one is above the other or whatever. This is a surface that's not embedded. So you put a tube there, and then you do your pair of pants. There's a cobordism going from that surface to that surface, fixing the extremities. If you don't think they're embedded in R3, okay? Just say they are not embedded. There is a cobordism, and so that's this three manifold that the diffeomorphism there is going to be coming. This graph is going to be three manifold. That's the one that.
So in principle, we know that 4D TQFT is supposed to be governed by dualizable free category, so which is a good point.
But the problem there is that it's totally deficient. You cannot say what. You cannot say even for a sphere. I mean, even for S2. I mean, in the whole Hegardt-Floer theory, and from the point of view, you have to have a puncture.
No, I understand, but somehow, usually in this TFT business, somehow the more you go down, the more well-defined things are.
So
in particular, you can ask what corresponds to a point.
Yeah, to a point, you have a candidate. The usual thing is that you could take. This is a tensor to categories. That's what we construct. So you can take modules over that. Okay. Then that would mean that U mod maybe is associated just to the interval. So the interval I should map then to U mod instead of the circle, but that part isn't clear. But that should be that. It's like what we saw in this talk. So you take U mod mod. It's like to a point in Rescheleken to.
As a braided two category. So you're saying that U mod.
No, it's a U mod. U mod is not. You need. It's only a subcategory of U mod that's going to be braided. So it's like in Rescheleken to IF, you would say this is UQ of. In Rescheleken to IF, I mean, if you were or in a Crane Yeater, that's what we saw. One way would in the 2IF Vero, maybe a 2IF Vero version. Rescheleken to IF. No, in Rescheleken to IF version, you cannot do that. I mean, you would want to do that at a root unity, etc. Anyway, there's a you cannot do that. There's an anomaly. So but essentially, you would want to think that this goes to that interval. Goes to UQ of G positive mod, and S1 goes to the Greenfeld center of that, which is, I mean, it's roughly speaking like that, except that it's just not. But that's a rough idea of what's going on in Rescheleken to IF, except that it's not. That's one point of view. In 2IF Vero, but yeah, you're right. 2IF Vero, that's where it goes to 4D. Yeah, 2IF Vero starts with this. But 2IF Vero is this would be associated to the interval. So 2IF Vero would not take G positive, it would take G there. So you did the double, but it's almost the same. Yeah.
So the problem is that this guy is not sufficiently dualizable. Is that?
It's so this category should have a subcategory. It's like we only have the positive part. So if we had the whole thing, it should be a braided monoidal 2 category. Okay. So, but that's not enough. Yes, as you say, you need more usability properties to go all the way
well,
up.
Basically, dualizability is basically some finiteness property.
No, yes, that's the same. Yeah, that's the same. Yeah. we don't expect that to work, but there are many problems. People have tried to make Agar-Floer in a true topological field theory, and there are many using Lagrangian correspondence, etc. But it's very difficult. There are many places where people don't know how to define things. Okay, so there are many bits of the field theories that are not defined. So people somehow have defined whatever was they needed to be able to get invariance of 3-4D manifolds. Then they improve the theory going down to make it more computable. So one important thing that's been done by Oru and Osasabu is construction of theory for links to get invariance of links. So that's what category? There was a question about Alexander polynomial, maybe I forget the beginning. So that does categorize the Alexander polynomial of a knot. Yeah.